I had such a powerful conversation with a new friend of mine, Jake Kauffman. He is a CEO coach, and we get into a lot of the nitty gritty about making changes, the stories that we tell, the belief that we have about ourselves, and the way that we can heal our mind and make dramatic changes in our life to actually see great results. So here's my friend, Jake. Welcome to Market Mavericks. I'm Matthew Eford. Join me as I speak with leaders who are redefining industries in every corner of the market. From startups to established businesses, we'll uncover the strategies, challenges, and insights that drive success. Get ready to be inspired by the Mavericks who are shaping the future of business. Welcome, everybody, to Market Mavericks. I have a new friend of mine, Jacob Kauffman, here. He and I met at a development day, leadership development day here in North Atlanta. Just kind of happened to run into each other and struck up a great conversation. And Jake, man, I'd love for you to share just about who you are, what you do, what businesses you have, and kind of the role that you play in them.
Yeah, definitely, Matthew. Thanks again for having me, and been looking forward to this conversation all week. So excited to be here. But as far as I'm concerned, my name's Jacob Kauffman, like you mentioned. I run a coaching and consulting practice. So I work with CEOs and executives to optimize for their subconscious mind and help
Nice.
them rewire their subconscious mind for greater success. I've been doing it for almost 10 years full time for going on 7 years now. But my background is actually in the healthcare technology space.
Okay.
So I started a SaaS company, a software as a service company back in 2015 with a couple of other co founders. And we grew that company fairly quickly from nothing to little over $4 million in annual business in about 18 months.
Wow. Okay.
So
That's a
really
quick
rapid
ramp.
growth
Yeah.
by yeah. Rapid growth by most standards. And as a result, I became keenly aware in a very short period of time that people don't have business problems. They simply have personal problems that show up in their business. And,
Sure.
that revelation, if you will, coincided with my own personal growth journey.
Okay.
When I was in my late 20s, a couple of years before I started that business, I really started to work on myself because I started to read self-help books and realized that self-betterment, self-improvement was in many ways the biggest key to experiencing greater success. So that forced me to go within myself because I didn't have the language for this at the time. But what I
Sure.
would say to my clients and what I would say to you or anyone who's listening to this podcast, I would say that the pattern always reveals the problem.
Okay.
Now,
So
what do I
tell
mean
tell
by
tell.
that?
Yeah, I was about to say, tell me more on that.
Yep. So what I mean by that is when we don't reconcile the past, we are bound to repeat it in the present.
Okay.
I had noticed myself repeating various patterns of self sabotage across different relationships, across different jobs.
Okay.
So, same dance or same song, different dance, same package, different bow. And so, of course, I'm looking at this and I'm becoming this observer of my own behavior patterns and looking at the different areas in my life where I stand to grow. And I'm realizing very quickly that, oh, okay, I'm repeating very similar patterns across different jobs, across different relationships. What are those patterns rooted in?
Okay.
What experiences are they attached to? Because I wasn't born with those
Sure.
tendencies, those patterns. And yet here I am constantly being confronted by them, and they're preventing me from being more successful across the different areas of my life, health, wealth, relationship, etc.
Okay.
And so that forced me to kind of take a peek underneath the hood, if you will, and go within myself to determine, the root of those things. Rather than just looking to something external to try to solve for those things, I needed to shift myself, right? And this speaks into what is referred to as the law of correspondence, right?
Okay.
So within, so without. Our external reality and the results that we experience in our life, in our relationships, in our business is just a reflection of what is going on inside of us.
Okay.
right? So if we want to make a shift, we have to shift the unconscious person.
I love that. So
So
I
that,
heard years ago that,
yeah,
or a couple years ago, that 90 to 95% of our decisions every day are subconscious. And
correct. Yep.
that just floored me, right? Because I look across my day and I'm like, I'm trying to be intentional, which we
Mhm.
talked about intentionality at that the leadership development that we were at.
Yep.
Brad did a fantastic job sharing about intentionality there, and
Yeah.
and that was such a revelation. So talk
Mm.
to me, what does that look like? So what does
Yep.
that look like when you're working with a CEO? I know we're kind of jumping right into the deep end, right?
Oh, you're
But
good.
this is, to me,
Yep.
is very timely. It's very fascinating because there's so many things that we do that are patterns or habits that
Yep.
we try to make changes. We want
Yep.
to do better, and that we fall back into that old pattern. So,
Yep.
talk to me through how do you consult do you give? What are some areas? Number one, what are some areas that you see are most common that CEOs struggle with? And then number
Yep.
two, what are some practices that you give them to help navigate that experience?
Yeah. Great question. So the first step in making any long lasting sustainable change is an increase in awareness.
Okay.
Going back to my story, I needed to determine what was at the root of these patterns that I continued to find myself repeating.
Okay.
Right. So that's the first step. But I think it's important that we create a distinction between our conscious mind and our unconscious mind, which you started to do. Right. You're
Sure.
absolutely correct. 90 to 95% of our behaviors are dictated by our unconscious mind. What about our unconscious mind? It ultimately comes down to our beliefs and our identity,
Okay.
most of which is formed in early childhood
Okay.
between the ages of 2 and 7, which is
Okay.
when roughly 70% of our psychological development happens.
Okay.
That become the whole of our personality. And then we grow up. And of course, you hear this oftentimes where people are like, well, this is just who I am. Your personality is not who you are, it's who you have become in response to what has happened to you
Okay.
or what has not happened to you. So our conscious mind, excuse me, is it's connected to what we say and it's attached to what we know. But our unconscious mind, as you pointed out, is responsible for what we do,
Okay.
and it's connected to who we are. The reason why that's important is because people are rarely what they say, but they are always, always, always what they do.
Yeah.
And that's why when I'm working with a CEO or with one of my clients, we can't modify for a behavior at the level of behavior. What do I mean by that? Let's just say, for example, you create a New Year's resolution that you want to lose weight.
Sure.
Very common New Year's
Very
resolution
common
for a
New
lot of
Year's
people.
resolution.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep, that I think a lot of people will relate to, or just to get in shape, gain more muscle, whatever it is, health and fitness. So they do what? They optimize for two or three things, right? Cut out alcohol, optimize for my diet and my nutrition, and either start going to the gym consistently or hire a personal trainer. All of those things are behavioral, meaning all they do is address the symptoms.
Yeah.
So most coaching that's available to people today, to men especially, and I say men because I work exclusively with men,
Okay.
is merely symptom reduction. It doesn't actually get to the root cause of the issue, which is why studies show that 90% of people who hire a coach, whether it's a personal trainer, whether it's a dietitian or a nutritionist, or whether it's a life coach, 90% of people return back to their former level of behavior once the coaching is removed.
Wow.
Why is that? Because their beliefs are the same. Their identity is the same, which is why we never rise to the level of our goals. We always fall to the level of our beliefs.
Okay. Yeah. So I had a mentor of mine, reference. in the seals, right? That they
Yeah,
break them down so they can build them back, and that
correct.
in the fight that they never
Hmm.
rise to the occasion. Exactly what you said. They
Yep,
default to their highest level of training, but they've been
yep,
given a new identity in that moment that they
yep,
know what they can do.
yeah.
So why are other coaches not doing this? Right? Why is this
Mhm.
not revolutionary? I know that you're having great success in it,
Yep.
but why is everyone else not doing this? If we know it doesn't work, why
Hmm.
do we continue to just treat the symptoms?
Well, we always seem to want more of what doesn't work.
Okay, tell me more about that.
Right? The primary goal of the ego is to maintain the status quo.
Okay,
What is the best way for it to do that? It's to hide the truth from us. And the truth that I'm talking about in this moment is the root cause of the interpersonal issues that we all struggle with that hold us back from being as successful as we're capable of being. Why do most people not want to change? Because the ego doesn't want change.
sure.
The ego wants to remain the same. It wants to keep us in the space of our comfort zone. So when you think about that, what is the space in which true transformation is possible? It's pain.
Yeah,
It literally requires that we reconcile our pain such that we can move beyond it. But nobody actually wants to do that, or at least nobody's ego wants to do that. Now, the big problem with people is they've so closely identified with their ego that they think, and I kind of mentioned this earlier, they think, well, this is just who I am.
sure.
It's like, well, no, it's not. It's your programming, it's your conditioning, it's beliefs that you picked up from your parents or from your grandparents that just continue to get handed down across generations that you've just taken on and now you assume are your own, right? Because you didn't really have a choice in the matter or you don't remember,
Yeah,
right? You don't remember when you were 2 or 7 and you had these very significant experiences that shaped you in a really profound way that you are now unconscious to. And that's why, like I mentioned, if we want to create a sustainable change, we have to shift the unconscious person. And
okay,
that looks like deconstructing their current belief system and their current identity and optimizing for a new belief system and a new identity. What's the bridge between those two things? It's pain.
okay,
It's addressing our pain, it's reconciling our pain. And nobody wants to do that. Why? Because it's inherently uncomfortable.
sure. So
Right?
so let me take a pause there. As you said, you work exclusively with men, and I love that.
Yep.
Um, how do you work through the I'm not a
Hmm.
touchy feely guy. I don't like to
Sure.
talk about my feelings.
Yep.
And I've heard many men say,
Yep.
I'm an Ephod, and we don't share our emotions. I'm an Ephod,
Sure.
and I'm an angry. I'm an Ephod man, and I'm just an angry man. You hear these things. How do you work through that? So I know that there are people, myself included, that hear this and they have
Mhm.
some of those thoughts because the beliefs that are in their head, they're starting to play that loop of no, 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 this
Yeah.
is too good to be true. This is not going to work for you. How do you overcome that with somebody?
Well, you have to have a compelling reason first and foremost. There are two great catalysts for transformation, and that's great love or great suffering.
Okay,
And it seems to be that for men, great suffering is the path, right? We kind of need to be pushed there, or we need to be hit upside the head
sure,
with a struggle that compels us to change, right? As Tony Robbins once said, until the pain of staying the same is greater than the pain of change, you're not going to change.
sure. That's a great point.
And so for many, this pain looks like, death, disease, divorce, something that is bigger than we know how to deal with.
Sure,
Um, Otherwise, you're just going to want to maintain the status quo. Like I mentioned, that's the primary goal of the ego, maintain the status quo, right? So when I hear you say, well, I'm just, an Ephod man, I'm an angry man, and this is just how I am, or this is
Sure.
who I am. And my question would be, well, who is that? And how do you know that's you? How can you be sure? So
Yeah.
part of it is literally teaching the distinction between your spirit and your ego.
Okay.
Because your ego is a part of you, but it is not actually you. And it's responsible for your negativity bias. It's responsible for the part of you that does not want to change.
Sure.
Right? So when someone says that, fundamentally speaking, I know that I'm not talking to the real, true Ephod man. I'm
Sure.
talking to the ego. And so once you wake people up to that distinction, right, well, then you can actually start to claim authority over it.
Okay.
Right. So part of my work with a lot of the guys that I coach is actually naming their ego. Because, like I mentioned in the beginning of our work together, and this is true for pretty much all people, by the way, before they start down the path of personal development and self growth, is they assume their ego is who they are.
Sure.
Right. So there's not a distinction that they draw between their ego and their true self, their spirit. But once we create that distinction, that separation, we have them name their ego, because what we name, we have authority over.
Okay.
And so now I can start to claim authority over the ego, which is responsible for what? My self doubt, my fear, my insecurities, because all of those things are tools of the ego to keep us in the space of our comfort zone, to keep us repeating old behavior patterns, and to ensure that we remain the same.
Okay.
Because if you think back to primitive times, anything that was unfamiliar was perceived as what? It was perceived
It's
as a threat.
dangerous. Yeah.
Correct, as dangerous. So we are still playing out that very primitive biological hardwiring when it comes to growth, right? When it comes to becoming the best version of ourselves, right? Which is why most people, uh, the growth that they really want is self help on their own terms,
Yeah.
which is what I would suggest is just bogus self help on their own terms.
Yeah.
Right?
Just wasting time.
Yeah, it's symptom reduction, right? I want to optimize for my health and my fitness, but I don't want to actually address the issues
Yeah.
that have gone into me becoming out of shape
Sure.
or
Yeah.
overweight.
I heard a pastor say one time that there's a crack in the wall and the homeowner calls in a painter. The painter
Yeah,
patches over it, paints it. A week later, the crack shows back. He calls a
right.
different painter. A different painter comes out. He does this 3 or 4 times. He's like, I need to, I'm getting terrible painters. Why is this not working? He has a
Yeah,
buddy that lives across the street. He's in construction. They're over for dinner. And he goes, wow, you have a foundation issue. He goes, what
yeah,
do you mean? He goes, that crack in your wall is caused by the foundation. He goes, oh,
yeah,
well, I've just been patching over it. And he goes, no, that's never going to work. You got to get to the
yep,
foundation, which is what you're saying.
100%. Yeah, it might work for a little bit, but it's going to rear its ugly head, right? Because all you're doing is addressing the symptoms, not the disease.
So then
And so,
how
yeah,
do you get to somebody before the 3Ds, the divorce, disease, or death?
mhm,
How
yeah,
do you break through with a man, young man, old man,
yep,
a CEO to
mhm,
get them to see this picture that great love? How do you compel them to great
mhm.
love and it's not just the um, that they get pushed into it by great tragedy?
Well, I would almost go so far as to say that you can't,
Okay.
because if you've known great love, you know that great love comes with great suffering. So it pretty much just boils down to suffering.
Sure. No, that's a great point. Yeah.
You
Uh,
know, I once heard it say that grief is love's souvenir.
yeah. Yeah. When Noah passed, a friend of mine gave me a book and a guide written that every lament, every grief is a love story for those that are left behind. And there
100%.
definitely is a deep tie between those two things for sure.
100%. And so I don't think that you can get to someone before the 3Ds.
Okay.
Carl Jung referred to those things as necessary suffering, that it was necessary that you go through something like that so that you can awaken.
Okay.
Right? Because nothing else will get you to break free from your egoic preoccupations, right? And the patterns that you just continue to repeat because there's a reward there, right?
Sure.
There's a payoff. Every habit or pattern of behavior that we have, there's a payoff. I promise you that. And that's part of the work that we do with our clients is determining what is the payoff that you get out of your negative, you know,
Sure. The dopamine hit. Yeah.
destructive
Yeah.
behavior patterns, right?
Yeah.
And it's really very simple because everyone's addicted to something. It's just a matter of what.
Sure.
Um, and every addiction, by definition, is in an attempt to solve for pain. Right? So once we determine what the pain is and we solve for the pain, guess what happens to the addiction?
Well, yeah. It goes
Goes
away.
away.
Yeah.
100%. Yep. But as long as we're doing symptom reduction, we're not getting to the we're not actually getting to the root cause of the issue, which is pain.
Sure.
And so the addiction, um, if it does end, it's just likely to shift.
Okay.
So we see this all the time. I'll give you a great example. People, they go, especially men nowadays, right? They go from watching porn or drinking too much or smoking weed, right?
Sure.
These very overt destructive behavior patterns to working out, being obsessed with making money, right? And self-actualization,
Yeah. Sure.
right? Same song, different dance, same package, different bow. In both instances, both men are addicted. They're just addicted to different things. That's it.
Yeah.
And
And the
so,
latter is more appealing to the common culture. So it makes sense when you see guys go from one to the next. And that's a great distinction. So
correct.
let me interrupt you just for a second.
Yeah.
What are some questions? What are
Mhm.
some things when you bring on a new client? I don't want you to give away
Yep.
the secret sauce. I want to be respectful
No, you're fine.
of your business, but what does that process look like? So
Hmm.
somebody's either experienced the 3Ds or they're afraid of the
Yep.
3Ds and they're like, hey, I really need to reach out to Jake. I want to explore this more. Talk us through
Yep.
what that process looks like.
So initially, it looks like taking a belief audit. So we have to audit for someone's beliefs,
Okay.
right? We have to increase conscious awareness, like I mentioned. That's the
Okay.
first step, awareness, right? The second step, we'll call it acceptance. Once we're aware of what the root cause issue is, then we have to experience healing and transformation, growth and transformation,
Sure.
right? And we move into acceptance of what has happened to us, reconciling the pain from the past. That's the second step, right? The third step is action. We have to take new, different action if we hope to create new and different results,
Sure.
right? Um, and so the big thing with clients in taking new and different action is to create what is referred to as a disconfirming experience,
Okay.
right? So
And what is that? I'm not familiar with that.
so let's just say you have a really big goal for your business,
Sure.
like a tangible one, and yet you experience doubt, insecurity, or imposter syndrome around achieving that goal. Once we address what is ultimately responsible for the self doubt, the insecurity, and the imposter syndrome, right? Because those are just side effects.
Sure.
Once we address for what's responsible for those things, what happens to them? They decrease,
Okay.
right? And when doubt, when insecurity, when imposter syndrome decreases, what happens to one's felt resistance? That also goes down. And then once we decrease resistance, right, we increase consent. So
Gotcha.
now they actually start to step into the thing that they previously doubted themselves around. And the more they experience progress around that goal, it creates a disconfirming experience,
Okay.
right? So I am now achieving, now I am realizing that thing that I thought at one point in time I was incapable of doing. Now I'm doing it. That fundamentally creates an identity shift.
Yeah. I love that. So I was at a conference years ago when I was in college, and
Mm-hmm.
the speaker was speaking about the Bible says, "Be transformed by the renewal of your mind,"
Renewing of your
and
mind. Yep.
they were talking about that, and they got into the science of the
Yeah.
synapses and
Yep.
how you can rewire synapses in
Yep.
your brain,
Yep.
and how you can make those pathways stronger,
Yeah.
and the highway, a more clear highway, but it takes time, it takes intentionality to
Yeah.
do some of those things. So I love that
Yeah.
you're in line with that. I mean, it's just really cool to kind of bring it full circle.
Oh, totally. You're just using spiritual language, right? For what I'm using psychological language, but
Sure.
it's saying the same thing, it's in a slightly different way.
Sure.
To put another way, whenever we whenever we first try to develop a skill, we're always going to be confronted by what is referred to as conscious incompetence,
Okay.
which is being aware of the skill that I need to have, but not yet being proficient at it. Whether it's a hobby like golf or pickleball or tennis, whatever, or whether it's being an entrepreneur and learning how to run a business,
Sure.
you're always going to be confronted by conscious incompetence because you haven't yet developed that skill set. Therefore, you don't have confidence around it. But with consistency, the more you do it by virtue, the better you're going to get at it because that's what happens when we're consistent around anything, right? And then we're going to shift from conscious incompetence into what? Conscious competence,
Yeah.
where all of a sudden we have developed fluency around a specific skill. What does that do to our overall level of confidence? Goes up,
Sure.
right? And that's exactly what the Bible was talking about. Be transformed by the renewing of your mind, because now you have created new beliefs around that specific skill set, particularly related to your ability to effectively perform that skill, regardless of what it's in relationship to. It could be parenting, right?
Sure.
It could be your skill as a parent, because if you're a parent and you're listening to this, you know that parenting is a skill set.
Yeah.
100%.
A very challenging one.
A very challenging one. Yep, 100%. And the moment you think you've got it figured out, you realize very quickly that you don't. And
So
so,
go
go
ahead.
ahead.
I'm sorry.
But this is, we're saying the same thing, just in a slightly different way. There's spiritual language to describe exactly what we're talking about right now, and then there is scientific and psychological language to talk about what we're describing. Because
Is the
as we
final?
develop a new,
Go ahead. I'm sorry. I
now I
keep
was just
getting.
going to say, as we develop a new skill, you're correct. We create new synapses within the brain that literally creates a new mind.
Gotcha. And then is the final level of that the unconscious competence? Is that kind of the
Correct.
final level? So now
Yep.
your subconscious is working for you, not against you, in the
Yep.
direction that you want to go, because
Hmm.
you've kind of broken yourself back down to the core,
Yeah.
and now you've gotten to that level of, okay, now I'm going to leverage my subconscious mind. It's now working in the direction that I want it to go. Is that kind of
100.
the culmination of this?
Yep. It becomes natural. It becomes, just we're able to repeat it on automatic. And right in the military does this,
Sure.
right? Because when you're in combat, you can't think about like, what do I need to do in this situation? You need to Your skill set as a soldier needs to be so embedded that, like you mentioned, it becomes unconscious, such that when you're in a combat situation, you just react from the space of your training.
Yeah.
Right. So you've practiced the skill set so much so that you just do it without even thinking, and it becomes unconscious. So yeah, the final step is unconscious competence,
Yeah.
right? Where the skill that you've developed simply becomes a habit. A habit, by definition, is just an unconscious behavior pattern.
Love that. So you work with the CEO.
Yep.
One of the questions I love to ask is mentorship and community,
Yep.
right?
Hmm.
I'm a part of mastermind groups,
Sure.
discipleship groups. There's so
Hmm.
much value that we find in community. I
Yep.
believe that we weren't designed to do life alone. God designed us to
Yeah.
be in community. So how are you leveraging that within your
Hmm.
business? Do you
Yep.
have community functions? What does that
Hmm.
look like for CEOs that are getting into
Yep.
that next level of conscious
Yep.
competence and then getting as far into
Yep.
unconscious competence? Then where does that kind of go?
It's a great question. I mean, when you cultivate who is around you, you're cultivating who you are.
Yeah,
You've probably heard it said before that we are a reflection of the five people that we're closest to.
sure.
And so community is a huge aspect of what we do, primarily because we're transformation always takes place from the I to the we to the all, right?
Okay,
So it first takes place on an individual level, on a personal level, and then it extends to our immediate relationships, right? With, say, family members, with our spouse. And then it extends to our broader community from there, our friendships, our business relationships, our employees. And so we run masterminds, we run
nice,
annual retreats. We've done so for years. So all of our guys that work with me one on one are brought into our mastermind, so they get that community support, they get
cool,
that community aspect, so that they start to integrate the transformation that we're doing one on one within the context of a group. And then we run retreats multiple times per year, and we have for 5, 6 years now. So we do 2 different retreats per year that all of the guys are invited to further create community and a sense of community.
sure. And so you work with the CEO.
Yep.
Obviously you don't handle everything at once, right? I mean, how
And
do you
no.
eat an elephant in one bite at a time? So this is
Yep.
a long, strenuous process, but
Hmm.
then they continue to go through life, and life is messy and
Yep.
life is hard. And so
Yeah.
I'm guessing you're constantly kind of going back to the root cause
Yep.
consistently just throughout the entire
Yeah.
life that you work with somebody.
Yeah. 100%. I mean, nothing's proven until it's tested. And so we're constantly reinforcing the basics, right? If you think about what is the difference between pros and amateurs,
Sure.
pros just do the basics better.
Yeah.
If you think about basketball, um, what are the basics in basketball? Pass, dribble, shoot. Why is Stephen Curry, you know,
Yeah.
one of the highest
Amazing.
paid
Yeah.
right, amazing, one of the highest paid athletes on the planet? It's because he's the best shooter ever.
Yeah.
Ever. He does one of those basics better than anybody has ever done it. And because of that, he's one of the highest paid athletes on the planet, and he's widely regarded as one of the best basketball players ever. And so we're constantly reinforcing the basics. But in our work, it's, like I've talked about identifying the root cause issue of things, but a significant part of that is identifying our core sin, because we all have a core sin.
Okay.
The Enneagram of Personality, if you're familiar with
Oh
it,
yeah.
um, it refers to that as our fixation. So every type has a fixation.
Okay.
Another way of thinking about this is just an
So,
addiction.
I'm an 8. What is
Yep.
diagnose me if you got a second? Tell me something that I'm a very strong 8. So
Yes.
give me some feedback on that.
Yeah. So the addiction or the fixation of the eight is the need to be in control.
Sounds about right.
Now, where that stems from is because the childhood wound of the eight is a rejection of innocence.
Okay.
So they were forced to grow up at a very, very young age
Okay.
and assume a greater degree of responsibility than they should have
Gotcha.
at a young age. And so as a result, they developed this self-protective scaffolding, right? And the need to be in control is a self-protective mechanism because they're constantly operating in the anticipation of being rejected.
Sure. Yeah,
And
it
so,
sounds pretty spot on to me.
yeah, so the need to be in control, the need to be right, is their fixation or their addiction. Now, the Enneagram assumes that we will never actually like fully claim victory over our addiction.
Sure.
We will just increasingly become more and more effective at managing it over time. Now, in the beginning of our work with a client, it's to create awareness, like I mentioned. Why is that so important? It's because what we're aware of, we're in control of, but what we're unaware of is in control of us.
Sure.
And so the moment you become aware that, oh, my addiction, the need to be in control, that in many ways is running or ruling my decision making,
Sure.
both at home and in the workplace. Now that we've created that awareness, now we can actually go to work on it. So we can create boundaries around it, right? We can create healthy habits and patterns of behavior in order to bring a level of sobriety to it. Like I mentioned, the goal isn't to completely get rid of it. The goal is to be in control of it, which then puts me on the path to later leverage it.
Sure. Because it's a great skill set,
It
and
is
it
a
has
great,
served me very well. And I,
yep.
I shared earlier about our son Noah passed away in 2020, and I remember
Sorry to hear that.
the time. So we learned in about this time of year in September 2013 of his diagnosis, and
Okay.
I remember I had such a hard time. I mean, it's tragic. It's shaped our lives
Mhm.
tremendously. We will still continue to learn to walk through grief, Hannah and I, my
Sure.
family. But in the early days, I fought so hard to try to control. I tried to
Yeah.
learn as much about the diagnosis as I could. I tried to get us in front of the right doctors. I just tried to do as much
Yeah.
as I could. And there was a point in time, maybe after the new year, he was born in March,
Okay.
just a general timeline, that I had this not epiphany, but it was just this moment of saying, for me as a man of faith, God, I am not in control.
Yep.
And in this moment, I'm going to do the best that I can to relinquish control to you and try to
Hmm.
give that up. And
Yep.
that has been a dramatic change for me since then.
Yeah.
But to your point, the subconscious, if I'm not actively thinking about that, if I'm not
Yep.
setting up some guardrails in my life, man, I will just start plowing over people. And it's
Right.
my way or the highway. And
Yep.
I'm gonna control this, and I'm gonna run it from top to bottom. And
Yep.
so I love that you said that, and I appreciate the free therapy there. I mean,
Yeah.
it's spot on. And I love the Enneagram. Hannah and I've read a
Yeah.
lot about that.
Yeah.
So talk to me about one
Mhm.
of the things you had mentioned when we met a few weeks ago is you have a book. So
Yep.
did you write your book? Is it based off of this? Is it based off this
Mhm.
experience? What's the book about? How does somebody get your book?
Yeah. So the best place to find it, as you can imagine, is on Amazon. The book is called Let Love In. The Pain Stops When the Truth Starts by Jacob Kauffman.
Nice.
If you search my last name, Kauffman, Let Love In should come up. But the book is all about what sent me down the path of personal development.
Nice.
Because without continuous personal development, you are all that you will ever become.
Yeah.
Period. And so, for me, my journey of personal development started when I was in my mid to late 20s,
Okay.
when I first started going to therapy. And I kind of talked about this at the beginning of our conversation when I started noticing myself repeating various patterns across jobs and relationships. What I ultimately discovered in going to therapy was, well, first, it was acknowledging that I was sexually abused when I was roughly 12 or 13 years old.
Wow. Sorry to
And
hear that.
then I appreciate you saying that, but I'll be honest with you, it was the best thing that ever happened to me because it truly, truly gave me the gift that I have now today, which is the gift of empathy.
Wow.
And I'm able to bring that into my relationship with my clients and how I serve my clients. Keep in mind, the only way that I am able to say that today, to sit before you and in all honesty say that, is because of the immense amount of work I've done on myself
Sure.
in alchemizing that very painful experience, because it was very painful, such that now it has become a source of incredible, incredible insight
And empathy is so
and
powerful,
strength.
right? I mean, empathy
Right.
is where you can engage with somebody instead of just saying, "Hey, that looks hard." You can
Right.
say, "Hey, I know that's hard. I don't know
Right.
the full story. I'm not
Mm-hmm.
in your shoes, but I've been
Yep.
in similar shoes." For
Yep.
us having a son that's passed, I mean, we get connected to folks that are going through the loss of a loved one, and
Mm-hmm.
there's a depth of conversation that we're able to have with them that I
Yep.
could never have had before we had that experience.
Right. Yeah, because we come into wisdom painfully.
Yeah, that's very
And
true.
so I after an immense amount of healing work that I did within myself, I was like, I feel compelled to write a book about my story, my journey. What did I do to heal myself in a way that has put me on the path to an incredible amount of success, that I've been able to experience, humbly speaking, professionally, personally, and has allowed me to, coach some incredibly influential and successful people.
I love that. I love that, and I love that. One of the things that I've mentioned with other folks that have been on Market Mavericks with us here is
Mhm.
that you chose not to be a victim,
Yeah.
and what a hard choice to make.
Yeah. I mean, it's every victim loves a villain.
Yeah,
And the reason or every victim honestly needs a villain. And the reason I say that is, until we heal the pain from our past, we will continue to be a victim of what has happened to us. And we will continue to victimize other people because
uh,
we will blame other people and other things for our problems. Now, what does that look like practically speaking? It looks like blaming they or them, the
yeah,
other.
sure,
Democrats, Republicans, right? Hamas, whoever it is,
sure,
right? We will blame other people and other things outside of ourselves for our issues. What's crazy about this is our brains are actually wired to do that. It's called external locus of control.
yeah,
That our instinct, our impulse is to blame other people and other things outside of ourselves for our results or for our lack of results. What is not hardwired, what needs to be cultivated and practiced and honed over time, is internal locus of control. Be transformed by the renewing of your mind. I am the source of every result in my life, good
yeah,
or bad.
yeah. I love that. It's the old adage of bitterness, right? It's like drinking poison, trying to hurt somebody else,
Yeah, hoping the other person will
and
die.
hoping the
Yep.
other person will die. And
Yeah.
I love that you're calling that out. Well, Jake, man, I appreciate your time. We will definitely have you back. There's a whole list of questions that we didn't even
Sure.
approach. We just jumped right into the deep end. I appreciate your time. How does somebody get
Definitely.
connected to you? That this has
Yep.
been a resounding conversation for them to hear, and they say, "Hey,
Yeah.
I need to get connected." How do they get connected to you?
Yeah, best place to interact with me, get connected is on Instagram.
Okay.
So my handle is I am Jake Kauffman. Again, that's Kauffman. Otherwise, I am on Facebook, first and last name. Again, Jake Kauffman. And look forward to interacting with you and hearing from you.
I love that. Yeah, I'll make sure and put those in the show notes and tag them. Well, Jake, man, I appreciate your time very much, brother. I appreciate you coming on. I look forward to playing golf sometime soon, and we'll definitely keep the conversation going. Everybody, thank you for joining us today on Market Mavericks. We'll see you soon. Thank you for joining us on this episode of Market Mavericks. We hope you're walking away inspired and ready to take your own adventure to the next level. Don't forget to follow the show to keep up with our latest episodes. And if you enjoyed today's conversation, make sure to subscribe, share it with others who could benefit. And hey, if you know a market maverick who has a story that needs to be heard, please drop their name in the comments. We would love to bring their insights to the show. Until next time, keep pushing boundaries and leading with purpose.